Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Wednesday morning. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today, and I hope you're finding our adventure through the Psalms helpful. Today is Psalm 136. It's described in some Jewish circles as the great Hillel, the great hymn of praise, and I'll read it to you now. Psalm 136. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who alone does great wonders, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who by his understanding made the heavens, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who spread out the earth on the waters, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who made the great lights, for his steadfast love endures forever. The sun to rule over the day, for his steadfast love endures forever. The moon and stars to rule over the night, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who struck Egypt through their firstborn, for his steadfast love endures forever. And brought Israel out from among them, for his steadfast love endures forever. With a strong hand and an outstretched arm, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who divided the Red Sea in two, for his steadfast love endures forever. And made Israel pass through the midst of it, for his steadfast love endures forever. But overthrew Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who led his people through the wilderness, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who struck down great kings, for his steadfast love endures forever. And killed famous kings, for his steadfast love endures forever. Sihon, king of the Amorites, for his steadfast love endures forever. And Og, the king of Bashan, for his steadfast love endures forever. And gave their land as a heritage, for his steadfast love endures forever. A heritage to his servant Israel, for his steadfast love endures forever. It's he who remembered us in our low estate, for his steadfast love endures forever. And rescued us from our foes, for his steadfast love endures forever. Who gives food to all flesh, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the God of heaven, for his steadfast love endures forever. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So you get the impression his steadfast love endures forever. Yes, it's an incredible psalm, and unfortunately, I think the English translation doesn't really kind of get it right. I think, because it just comes across as a bit boring if I was I'd kind of first read this, because it says every verse has a sentence and then it says for his steadfast love endures forever. It just comes across as a bit boring. I think though that kind of, as I understand it, the English kind of doesn't do it justice, because, especially when you read it like this, because I think we have to understand is that you'd have probably a cantor or somebody singing it, and then all the people reply. So you can almost imagine, so give thanks to God of gods. All the people say, for his love endures forever. And then go, give thanks to God of gods, for his love, and all the people say together, for his love endures forever. And you can imagine everybody, with this great congregation, one person telling out why God's great, and then everyone responding, for his love endures forever. And apparently, that's not a very good translation either. For his love endures forever, it translates a bit. It's a bit of a cumbersome translation with like endures. It just sounds a bit kind of boring, really. Apparently, a better translation would be something like, for his love has no end. It was 6 syllables in Hebrew. And you can imagine everyone saying, for his love has no end. So the way to kind of think about this psalm is, rather than thinking it just reads a bit boring, actually imagine a lot of people in a temple or a church or something, and someone gives a reason, and then all the people say, for his love has no end. And it just again and again and again. So the way to kind of think about it is, imagine a great big service, somebody calling out, give thanks to God of gods, and all the people saying, for his love has no end. And it goes on and on like that. And that's kind of the way to think about it. And if you think about it, it's actually not boring. It's like a response all the people can say. And very often people couldn't say read or whatever. So somebody would call out, and then everyone and all the people say, nice. And that's kind of, and if you think about it like that, it makes it much more interesting. And you can imagine, it being in church or something like that, and all the people have this response saying together. You get the picture. It's kind of much better. And the word love, or the word for his steadfast love, implies very strongly that about the faithfulness of God. That's what they're responding. He's saying that God is faithful. And in all the 22, whatever it is, verses of this psalm, the people, 26 verses of this psalm, the people are remembering in their chant that God is faithful, that God is true. And I think it's very important to us to remind that sometimes. I mean, sometimes things happen that we don't understand. And sometimes things happen that stretch our faith, we have, maybe all things happen, or we get frustrated, or, feel stuck, or wherever it may be, and sometimes we tear our hair out. And actually this reminds us that God is faithful, that, God says God does what God says. And all the people saying, for his love has no end, are reminded that, God is true to his word. So that's what this whole psalm is about. The whole thing is going back over history and so on, and being reminded that God is faithful. So each of these verses, a cantor recites a reason why God is faithful, and all the people say, for his love has no end. And if you go through it, it's in a series of sections. Verses 1 to 3 are really about how good God is. Give thanks for he's good, for he's God of gods, and he's the Lord of lords. So in the first 3 verses, again, remember this byplay going on between the cantor and the people responding. They're reminding that God is good, that God is Lord of lords, and that God is, King, God of gods as well. So God is faithful. So all the people say, for his love goes on forever. Then in verse 4 to 9, then we have here about a reason why God is faithful is to do with God's creation. And in the first couple of verses, you've got really to do with his wisdom in creation. And this has sort of echoes in the book of Proverbs, which says in verse 5, for example, who by understanding made the heavens. And again, this is reference here to God's wisdom. God is not just powerful in creation, but God is wise in creation as well. And there's echoes here of the book of Proverbs about, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so in verses 4 to 6, you've got the wisdom of God, reflected in the book of Proverbs, in creation. But you've also got God creating the world as well. And you've got echoes here of the book of Genesis as well, when you've got he spread out the earth and the waters, who made the great lights, who took a sun to rule over the day, moon and stars over that. There's echoes there of the book of Genesis in chapter 1. So here in verses 4 to 6, you've got God's faithful love, God's love going forever, but being shown in creation through the wisdom and through the way he created the world. So echoes there of Proverbs, the wisdom, and Genesis in God creating the world. Just to plug, by the way, when we finish these Psalms, we're going to be going on to Genesis after that, so something to look forward to there. Then verses 10 to 16 is really about God's Redeemer, God as Redeemer. That means God as rescuer. The people were, and there's echoes here of the book of Exodus, the early chapters of Exodus, where God's people were slaves in Egypt, and God set them free. And because it reads a bit difficult to us, he struck Egypt through their firstborn, and so it reads kind of quite it's quite difficult for us. But you've got to remember that this is really, for the people of God, this is really a story of rescue, that God saved them from slavery in Egypt. So, and you've got echoes here of the book of Exodus. Then it goes on from verse 17 to 21. Then you've got God leading the people in conquest of the promised land. That's what all this business about Sihon of the Amorites and Og the king of Bashan. You read of them in the book of Deuteronomy, that they were given that land to conquer. And what's interesting here is that they clearly attribute their victory to God. They're not saying, won't we wonderful warriors, give medals to all the great soldiers and everything like that. He's very much giving praise to God here. He tributes God for the fact that they've got into the promised land. That's what all this stuff about, Og and Sihon and so on. These were sort of warriors and from the other side, if you like. And he's saying that God gave them victory over these people. God gave them the land in which to live. Then verses 23 to 25 is like a summary of it all. He remembered us of low estate. He rescued us from foes and gives food to all flesh. You've got creation. You've got deliverance, redeemer, and so on. You've got a summary again. Then finally at the end, to sum it all up, oh, give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Or perhaps a better translation, or give thanks to, you imagine someone say, give thanks to the God of heaven. And all the people say again, for his love has no end. So here in this fantastic Psalm 136, the way to think of it is person giving half a verse, and all the people shouting out together, "For His love has no end." And going through, you hear about God's wisdom and God's power in creation, God's redeeming, setting His people free, God giving His people somewhere to live, and it just being a fantastic song, and all the people are being reminded of God's faithfulness and God's love. I hope that's helpful. Just to quickly remind you, Facebook for some reason allowed me back onto St Bart's Facebook again. If we ever take me off again, you can always watch us on St Anne's Church, Lower Pens. If you can't find us at St Bart's, the message will be coming, but you can always find us on St Anne's Lower Pen. Look for that one, and you'll find that as well. Bless you. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a lovely Wednesday, and thanks for joining us for this amazing psalm. Tomorrow is a tricky one, but we shall look at it